Now I ask the Commission. Wish the Commission take the floor? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a few remarks on what I've heard. Let me first of all thank the rapporteur for the draft opinion which we have seen, which supports indeed many parts of the Commission's proposal. Let me, before I go into detail, say a few words on what we heard again from the outset. I believe the Commission said its proposal is not or goes beyond the problem of terrorism. It's addressing issues related to the security of citizens in general, going beyond terrorism. We based our work and the proposals we made on a thorough evaluation of the directive and an assessment of how it has been implemented and where gaps and problem lies. And our proposal tries to address these weaknesses which we have established in collaboration in the framework of that evaluation, with many discussions with member states, stakeholders, industry, manufacturers, the associations, also hunters and sport shooting associations, who were largely interviewed and consulted on the various topics, on the provisions of the directive. So again, what we were trying to do is address the weaknesses identified, those weaknesses, those loopholes which we have seen and discovered, which allow, unfortunately, legal weapons to, or at least bear the risk to allow legal weapons to go into the illicit market. That's unfortunate that this exists, but it is that way. What we did not want to do, and I repeat it here again, is to make an amalgam and to insinuate or hint at the fact that hunters and sport shooters that make an amalgam with terrorists or terrorist groups in that context. We are very well aware that there are hundreds of thousands of law-abiding citizens that hunt, that aim, that like sport shooting and that own legal firearms and never cause any problems and are following closely the national or the EU rules and the national rules based on these EU rules. So, once again, we never did and we never wanted to make an amalgam of law-abiding sport shooters or hunters, and we definitely did not want to restrict citizens to own firearms in a legal way. Let me maybe just a few remarks which are important to us. I don't want to go into all details. Two issues. B7. What we did when I heard that, yes, for many of the speakers, previous speakers, that the resemblance criteria is not a good criteria. We are, and we said that as well from the outset of our discussion. We are aware that this is not a good criteria. We need to come up with and are open to any better solution that, in discussion of that proposal offered now here in the discussion at the European Parliament, but also in Council, to any way of framing that in a better way. Let me also underline, when somebody said it's a laughable text and proposal, this text was in the directive as of 1991, since its existence, under the B category allowed weapons. So what we did was moving that criteria, that particular subcategory from category B to A. Again, what we had in mind and what we are aiming at, and what I'm sure many of you share, is that what we would not want to see is semi-automatic versions of so-called assault weapons that are really made and meant for use by police forces or armed forces, and we would not want to see this in the hands of sport shooters. And I'm sure a semi-automatic version of a Kalashnikov is not really the type of firearm you would like to see on the legal market available to everyone. Now, the next thing is how to frame that in a better way. One of the speakers we heard mentioned criteria, and indeed we believe that this is one option to be looked into, frame what we meant and what we're aiming at in a better way on the basis of technical criteria. On collectors, which is another very important topic for the Commission, what we try to do with our proposal at the moment, the way the directive stands today, collectors are completely excluded. And I'm not criticising collectors. I'm sure there are many, as we heard, bona fide collectors that are law-abiding citizens and never cause any problems. Fact, however, is that the directive as it stands makes absolutely no provision. So a collector, according to our EU law, and I'm not saying member states do regulate that, many member states do regulate that at a national level in their own laws, which shows that they felt that there is a need to do something and to regulate collectors, while the EU law, which is the base law, says absolutely nothing. It says only the directive doesn't apply to collectors tout court. What we're saying is that we believe that collectors should be included in the directive. The way we regulate them afterwards is a different story, but there is no reason to say that what the base rules we put in place in Europe as the basis for national rules on firearms afterwards, we say nothing about collectors, and we say, well, basically there are no rules, we keep them out, no need to set any rules, which means that on the basis of our EU law, a collector has access, unprevented access to Category A weapons, which we ban for any other holder of firearms in Europe. This was basically behind the reason why we asked to include them in the directive and to say that they need to be regulated no matter what, as any other firearms holder, and should at least be under the obligation of the base law that we put in place here. Okay, that were basically the two problems I wanted to highlight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.